Dobar večer. Numerous articles, books and theses were written on what is the cultural, ethnical or national identity and what is it. So is it literature, is it country, is it blood, is it traditions, is it anything that it's culture in the broadest sense? Is one without another even possible? Is there a mixture, or is something more Slovenian or more American or less Slovenian because it's more American? I've been giving short lectures about the identity for many years now, and I still don't know the answer. Immigrant identity is indeed very difficult to capture. For example, is our current worth any less because it's from the one in Ptuj, or is it worth more because it's here? Is potica any less good because it's not made out of walnuts that were dried on pitch? Or is it better because we celebrate our culture here? Is the poem any less Slovenian because it's not in Slovenian language? Or are we widening our knowledge of our culture by reading these poems in English so wider audience can understand them even here? In the following few minutes, I will use the knowledge and wisdom of many people, different authors who wrote about Rose Mary Prosen, and just let me quickly read them. Petrič, Gobec, Valenčič, Žitnik, Serafin, Glušič, Milharčič, Hladnik, and Novak. A few years ago, we also hosted an exhibit about Slovenian American authors and educators at the Slovenian Museum and Archives, and Prosen was one of the 15 presented. She was born in 1931 in Newburgh, so the first Slovenian settlement in Cleveland, as a second child in the family. She went to Dominican school in St. Lawrence and then studied English, pedagogics and administrative studies at Kent and John Cabot, so our person. After that, she taught at the local schools until her position as an assistant at Kent State and later professor and chair for English language at RIC, where she stayed until her retirement. She wrote several articles, 5 collections of poems from 1971 till 1988. She was also a board member of Multi-Ethnic Literature of the United States and won the first prize for the Growing Up Slavic in America competition with her short memoir, Looking Back, Newburgh. I'm going to read something tiny bit out of it. She exclusively wrote in English. She was of a second generation, knows some Slovenian or knew some Slovenian, maybe Joe can tell you more about that because he met her. She compares her immigrant history with all of the histories of what she calls the ethnics. People who are not here for multiple generations, whose language is weirdly accented. People of different colors and backgrounds. And yet they're all the same. More on that, you can read in one of her articles, Of Whom and For Whom, Digressions of a New American Teacher, which was published in 1974. First of her poetry books, first 2 are poems and Ode the Ravagers, deal with the thematic of politics, which I'm not going to read today. She wants to tell it to the public. She says the political space and time lost the innocence. One of the best poems of that time is Surely Rides of Spring, in which she plunges directly into the killing of the students at KSU. In this time she starts to experiment with different, from very lyrical and completely abstract poetical motives and themes. The poems rarely mention anything Slovenian. They are poems of a time that she lives in. If you look at them, you see that they're very rare rhymes, so she's very modern. The length of the lines are different, the stanzas are not all the same. The thoughts are cut into multiple lines, there are a lot of repeating, almost chanting. And sometimes the poems don't even have any punctuation. But for tonight, there is a more appropriate book, so the third book, Apples, which was published in 1980, in which the theme completely changes and it talks about lost youth. I quote Petrič here, those things which became clear and understandable many years after. Things connected with Slovenian American heritage. Apple, of course, has many different meanings symbolically. We have the motives of a green apple in there. as a young, independent, innocent human. Biblical tasting of the apple as a forbidden fruit of knowledge, which she tastes and likes. The apple tree with the roots which go into the earth, her own roots spanning not into the city, but into the soil of the lost grandparents who were farmers. She experiences dread of losing the ability to know more about that particular world, which is now lost for her. Her immigrant roots are there as motives, but she cannot reach them except in sort of a ritual or poem. I'll read the seventh poem, which just has 7 there, so it doesn't have a title. For my paternal grandfather, whom I never knew. Even today, I still save jars, mostly pickle and juice, and their snug, bright lids. Out from the dishwasher, onto the shelf, as though I was a pioneer, collecting what I could against a long, cold winter, as though my lands were more than a city plot, and I had to hire hands for a bumper crop. My neighbors say, "What will you do with all those jars?" "You never know," I say, "you never know." In the middle of a dream, I might stake a claim, meet my grandfather, who will gravely nod. Grandfather, whom I never knew, will seed those rows from another world. Seeds he carried crossing an ocean twice, land he hewed for all his sons. My dream will grow Balkan trees, thick and gnarled, centuries sweet. Their apple blessed by local priest, whose Latin chant infuses spring. With charity and dark green leaves, the first pink blooms from wedding wreaths. For village girls at the altar base, lead me down those rows. I am harvesting, I am reaching groves, my shelves aglare, glass jars galore. Petrich writes about that. Poem 7 is certainly one of the more realistic ones, telling the story of the old-time jars that once preserved and held persevering, but now are empty except for the fond memories of the past and the daydreaming of the future past that will never be. Her short memoirs, or Rose Mary's short memoir, was published in the Anthology of Slovenian American Literature, which was already mentioned, which was edited by Dr. Gobec and Dr. Donchenko in 1977. And I'd like to read something that caught mine and many other eyes of the researchers, and I bet many of you will find your own story in them too. So it's her short memoir. It's a beautiful thing. Read it. It's in English. It's perfect. I quote, "Alas, however, I refused to speak Slovenian. What was a Slovenian? A hunky, a greenhorn, a dumb slob. You sound like you just got off the boat," another boy has said to me once. I became ashamed that my parents spoke funny, that we laughed too loud, that we drank homemade wine, that our walls were wallpapered in flower patterns, that we grew our own vegetables, that my father raised chickens in our garage, that he constructed his children's beds out of scrap wood with his own hands, that he repaired all our shoes in our basement, that my mother never sat down to eat dinner with us. She cooked, served, ate when everybody was finished. That our clothes and our curtains and towels were homemade. Some of them were out of feed bags from local granary. That stockings and more clothing were never thrown away but given to my uncle, who transported them into rags. That we had linoleum floors, and I suspect there were other more subtle aspects of that early life which I tried to reject but cannot remember. End of quote. But what does she see when she opens her eyes to the American households? I will read another short passage where she talks about the English textbook, where her and her father learned English language through it. Reading about Dick and Jane, Run Spot Run. I quote, "There were no Dicks or Janes in my neighborhood. There were many Josephs and Marys. In these strange first grade readers, the children never went to church. There were no nuns, nor priests, nor wine, nor polkas. Mr. Dick and Jane did not preserve tomatoes for the winter. She and her husband never argued about money. Mr. Dick and Jane never got drunk. There were no saloon in their lives of this peculiar American family. Strangers of all, there were no flowers growing in their yard. Thank you.